Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. 18 Thakur Korea Ketoriyachinanta Shari 18 Charan Bando Tine Moranat Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Now, the topic I wanted to start off with speaking today is some different things I want to speak about. Now, mostly you're all living in the brahmachari ashram, is it? And at these spaces, brahmachari ashram gives some shelter from the material world. Brahmachari ashram also means brahmachari guru kule vasandanta guru ritantita dasavan acharan nicho guru sudrida sohrida. That one lives in the brahmachari ashrams, one is supposed to be under the care and direction and the discipline of the guru and act as a menial servant with an attitude of friendship with the guru. So it's an atmosphere in which one is learning. It's a protected atmosphere. It means that there's no other outside influence. One is directly learning under the guru. In ISKCON it's different to traditional situations of living in an ashram, because in the sense that we have different disciples of different gurus, and mostly the guru doesn't live in any particular center. So we're all one under Prabhupada and under the Parampara, and we all follow basically the same, supposed to be following basically the same philosophy and practices of Krishna consciousness. But it is an observable fact, to borrow some terms from empiric science. It is an observable fact that even different gurus in ISKCON have, or different preachers have maybe some slightly differing outlook or emphasis on different things. And this tends to affect the disciples separately, which makes it all the more important to focus on what are actually Prabhupada's desires and instruction. How is he trained us? That should be the standard. Ultimately, within Prabhupada's instructions, there are parameters, there's leeway for instructing in somewhat different way. Not different philosophy, but maybe slightly different emphasis. Basically, in religious teaching, there are two basic approaches which usually interact with each other. They may be called the affective and the philosophical. Affective means that which affects us, emotion, and philosophical. So, fully affective would be only appealing to the emotions. Very little philosophy and mostly appealing to the emotions. This kind of bhakti preaching we find among popular proponents of bhakti. I'm talking about not in ISKCON. Here's one thing I personally learned from Prabhupada, that don't put your hand in your mouth. So please go out, wash it. I've told the story so many times that I need to tell it again now. And don't put your hand on anyone else. You're just contaminating them also. Of course you're a pure devotee, but from the point of view of purity, that's considered impure. So the popular preachers of Bhakti, they mostly rely on emotions. That they'll tell stories, and they have a very big profile as being a great Swami, and often a big beard to go with it. And they tell a lot of jokes and stories, and in this way they attract people's attention, tell people things that are very useful for them in their material life. They tend to mix that up also. This is a good Ayurvedic cure, how to cope with the modern corporate life, and like this. Especially those who are in the Bhakti line, they tell many stories of Bhakti. Stories from Krishna Lila or Ram Lila, and in this way they become popular and attract many followers. And you'll find in their pandals maybe lakhs of people come. But it's a purely emotional approach. It doesn't attempt to instruct people very much about what is the actual philosophy of the absolute truth. It doesn't really attempt to instruct people in much at all. They might ask people to be vegetarians or something, maybe. But we'll find that people who go to these popular meetings, in their practical life there won't be any change before or after. They may go for a Bhagavad Saptam, but in their daily life they'll come back and they'll go on with their daily puja at home. And like that, in the morning they'll do puja and maybe have the TV on at the same time. In the evening they'll be doing their TV puja. They'll be watching the TV. So it's like a mixture of bhakti and material life, which means it's not really bhakti at all. People can't progress unless they understand that Krishna is the enjoyer, I'm to be enjoyed. Material life is miserable. Sadhus, so-called sadhus who present, who live very nicely in this material world, or even if they present stories of Krishna or Rama, but they present it to us as a kind of entertainment without presenting to us how this material world is miserable. We have to come out of this. Then, without any philosophical background, it simply appeals to the emotions. And many people, in the meeting, they may chant Shri Ram, Jai Ram, or whatever. But they might even go and die at Ayodhya in some fight with some Muslims over the Ram Janma Bhumi. But this scientific process of Krishna consciousness has not been revealed to them. They cannot actually become free from material attachments. They may die in the name of Lord Ram, but it's some mixed up nationalistic idea on the idea that we are Hindus, which is a mistake in the first place, to think that I am this body or anything. Because of some social connection, I am a Hindu and I'm ready to die for that. I'm ready to die for my country. These are all mistakes. So in this way, the religious gets mixed up with the material because there's not... The emotional feeling is there, but it hasn't become purified. There's no separation between the understanding of what is material understanding and what is genuine spiritual understanding. And often people, when they use words like spiritualism, or they say God, they talk about God with no understanding of what these terms mean. So a philosophical approach means to understand clearly, as Prabhupada so many times emphasized, what is the difference between the soul and the body? What is the basic mistake of modern civilization? Prabhupada said they do not know the difference between the soul and the body. It seems to be a very easy thing to understand, and most Hindus, if you say to them that actually this body is temporary, we are eternal, Atma, they say yes, we know it. But in their practical life it's demonstrated they don't know it because they're living for sense gratification. So, knowing and understanding are different things. This knowing becomes knowing turns into understanding when we repeatedly hear and practice that in our lives. Many times people ask that, well, how can we understand, practically, how can we realize I'm not this body? So the answer is that we have to act on the platform of I am not this body. That means to act on the platform of spirit soul, to perform activities of devotional service. So a philosophical approach is required to understand that I'm doing this service to Krishna. Who is Krishna? He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What does that mean? That means we have to understand the different categories of the Absolute Truth. Bhagavat Tattva Vijnana Mukta Sangasya Jayati. One has to understand the science of the Absolute Truth to become free from the influence of the modes of nature. When we say Mukta Sangasya Jayati, free from the modes of material nature, that means not that we're aiming for mukti in and of itself, but unless we are freed from the lower modes of nature, or from the influence of the three modes of nature, then we cannot properly understand Krishna. Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moha, Mada, Adi, Avishta, Ishab, Nachare, Kishi, Pabe, Radha, Krishna. Bhakti Thakur has given the rhetorical question that as long as we're not free from the influence of lust, greed, anger, etc., then how can we attain to Radha and Krishna, who are so completely pure? In other words, there's no question, as long as we're not purified. So purification, that takes place by engagement in devotional service with proper understanding of why we are doing what we are doing, which requires we have to hear again and again and understand this philosophy of the Absolute Truth, so that we can see with the vision of knowledge, Jnana Chakshu, Shastra Chakshu. The eye of knowledge means the eye of knowledge received from Shastra. Otherwise, generally when we see something, we think, this is an object of my enjoyment. But that consciousness should change to see that this is an object that belongs to Krishna, should be engaged in Krishna's service. This change of consciousness from I am the enjoyer to I am the enjoyed. This change of consciousness is Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, the tendency is, even in the field of bhakti, the tendency is to enjoy it for ourselves, to try to enjoy it for ourselves. Just like someone may say, oh, I just came back from Vrindavan. And how was it? Bahut anand hua. Yes. I really enjoyed it. It was very enjoyable. But we don't go to Vrindavan it's not meant for our enjoyment. We might enjoy enjoyment even in Krishna consciousness. Then we have the wrong attitude. Everything is meant for Krishna's enjoyment. That's why people like to go to, they say, that was a really good kirtan. How can we say what's a good kirtan? Krishna can say whether he enjoyed it. And Krishna, and that's considered okay, because if you like to go to kirtan, what's the harm? If you like it, it's okay. Everything what you like to do is okay. So this idea, or they have the idea that homosexuality, that's also okay. As long as they're adult and they both consent, or you can have sex with anyone, anything, as long as they're adult and they agree. If they agree, then it's okay. It's all right. No. That's considered the legal standard. There's no moral consideration beyond this. So enjoyment hedonism has become the moral of modern society. So seeing the hippies so much addicted to sense enjoyment, Prabhupada said, if you be happy like this, you chant Hare Krishna, sing, dance, you can be happy. So that is true. That is Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam Pratipatam Purnamrita Asvadanam. If one is actually on this spiritual platform, if one is actually on the platform of serving Krishna, then he'll be very happy. or even in the beginning stages of Krishna Bhakti, one feels happy by kleshatni, one is freed from the pernicious effects of sinful reactions as one enters into Krishna consciousness. So it's true that certainly, and we can preach like that Krishna consciousness will actually make us happy, because everyone's looking for happiness. But at the same time, in Krishna consciousness, if we are doing it for our own happiness, then we didn't really catch the idea of Krishna consciousness as is given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Ashlishava Padaritam Ashtama Adashanam Namatam Kurutama Yata Tata, whatever situation. Yata Tata Abha Vinitatu Lampata That Pranadatas to say. That is the real mode of Krishna Bhakti. You make me happy or unhappy, my happiness is in service to you, Krishna. So, anyway, coming to one point I was discussing this morning with some devotees. Some point had come up that we were discussing the tendency within our society of ISKCON, and we're protected within the walls here. Then there are different gurus and different preachers may emphasize different things, and it can become confusing. Just like I might confuse you now by saying something different to what some other preachers have been saying. We were discussing this morning how there seems to be an increasing tendency within our society for certain devotees to regularly speak on the intimate pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan. And we were discussing that this had caused some consternation. Now, why should there be any consternation talking about the pastimes of Radha and Krishna? Because Krishna consciousness means to hear and chant about Krishna. And Prem Prayojan, the ultimate goal of Krishna consciousness is to appreciate and enter into the loving affairs of Radha and Krishna. Enter into means one has to enter in by service. That is the ultimate goal of the Gauriya Vaishnavas, to serve Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan. So why should it be any cause of anxiety if any of the members of our society are talking about these intimate pastimes? Well, that it is a cause of anxiety is apparent by the complaints or expressions of concerns that are coming from various quarters independently, that certain persons are speaking very intimate pastimes. Now, what is wrong in that? Well, you could say in one sense there is nothing wrong with that, but on the other hand, maybe there is, because we find, for instance, you'll find some quite detailed description of this in Hari Shari Prabhu's book, the Transcendental Diary, in which it was described that certain disciples of Prabhupada were discussing the intimate pastimes of Krishna. They weren't discussing Bhagavad Gita, only concentrating on this. And Prabhupada was very upset. That may seem surprising. Prabhupada was very upset. And they were reading from sections of Chaitanya Charitamrita which describe the intimate feelings of Radha for Krishna. And they were saying, well, Prabhupada, we're just reading your books. Prabhupada said, well, not everything in my books is meant for you. And then they said, well, Prabhupada, we're just trying to attain a desire for that platform. Prabhupada said, first deserve, then desire. And we find that Prabhupada himself, as did Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in their lectures, they would mostly speak again and again on Sambandha Gyan, not even so much on Abhidheya, on the practice of devotional service. Mostly on topics of understanding who is Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, what is the position of the jiva to serve him, and discussing various philosophical misunderstandings that divert us away from Krishna, such as Mayavad especially. So Prabhupada was very much emphasizing this because the whole root cause of our material disease or our material incarceration is non-acceptance of the fact that we are servants of Krishna, which manifests as envy of Krishna. And if we can simply understand this point, that I am the servant of Krishna, then automatically we enter into Krishna's service. Now, as far as speaking on Krishna's pastimes, that should be there also, but it's especially in the beginning stages, we have to see what is our diet. Just like we may say that, well, parathas and gulab jamuns, these are very good foods, not for sick people. Maybe in a small dose, but not for if you cannot digest, then it will simply cause more sickness. So how much we should hear such things? Prabhupada recommended we should hear Krishna book at night. But then in Prabhupada's Krishna book we find that along with the pastimes, Prabhupada has weaved in so much philosophical understanding so that we cannot misunderstand the pastimes. That they're presented fully with philosophy. Otherwise the tendency is to misunderstand. Now going back to those professional Bhagavatam and Ramayana speakers, they mostly speak pastimes. And people like to hear and they think, oh very nice, I'm enjoying Krishna Lila. But mostly people, they don't like to hear topics such as give up sense gratification. Bhagavatam, there are 18,000 verses. Mostly people like to hear the Rasa Panchadhyaya, the 5 chapters dealing with the Ras Lila. But there are many other verses, such as Pungsastriya Mittani Bhavametam Tayaraho Hridya Grante Mahu Ato Griha Kshetram Sutapta Vitaya Janasya Moho Yama Ammameti. What is the root cause of bondage in this material world? This attraction between male and female, which becomes a tight knot in the heart that causes us to become attached to home, children, wife, country, friends, bank balance, and binds us in illusion of thinking in terms of I, me, and mine. These are Bhagavatam verses that we very much need to hear. Now, if we only emphasize on Krishna Lila without giving this kind of understanding, didn't do it. Okay. Alright. Sorry. Close call. Then what happens, you see people here and they think, oh, this is very nice, I like to hear this, how Krishna is dancing with Radha and joking with Radha and so many things. And then we think, you see, I'm on that platform. And we can immediately go to this platform. But in between the platform of beginning Krishna consciousness and appreciating Radha Krishna Lila, there is a big section called Anartha Nivritti. And those who are Sahajya, which means they want to make everything very easy, then they cut out this section. We'll just go immediately there. But the problem is that by imagination, anarthas don't go away. We can imagine that I am on the highest platform, because you see, I like to hear about all these things. Anyone can do it. Now it's all, previously it was mostly in Sanskrit and Bengali, now it's translated in Hindi and English. Anyone can pick up a book and read all these leelas and memorize them and speak them. But actually to be free from anartha, this Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moha, Mada, Matsarya, that requires purification of heart by the process of Vaidhi Bhakti. And the tendency of neophyte devotees, especially those who haven't been trained very much, is to not be very much on the philosophical plan, but more on the affective plan. And immediately they hear, oh, very nice, this is what I want, and immediately go to that. So they'll be hearing Ras Leela and so many different intimate things, but there's been no purification of heart. So our acharyas, especially Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, to deal with so many sahajis, he was very much against this. Although he himself came to preach the highest topics of Krishna consciousness, the only reason he came to this world, but he did so in a very guarded manner, because the tendency has been traditionally to misuse that or place undue emphasis on that without giving the diet that the patient needs to become purified. And it's interesting to note that in our sampradaya, especially Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is quoted for his commentaries on the intimate pastimes of Radha and Krishna. But then if we see Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on the prayers of the personified Vedas, we'll find that he also commented on that in great detail, and he was very much learned in all the intricate philosophical details of Krishna consciousness. So even though he is a great acharya of describing the intimate pastimes of Radha and Krishna, he's also fully learned in all the philosophical conclusions of Krishna consciousness and doesn't avoid discussing them. So what we see is that often devotees, that if they're exposed to so much hearing of intimate pastimes, one thing is that they may start to think, well, Bhagavad Gita, that's just some lower topic. But then if we think like that, then we can't get trained in it, and we need that training. Without understanding Bhagavad Gita as it is, then how can we become free from the influence of the three modes of material nature? Unless we can discriminate between spirit and matter, unless we understand what is Krishna's position as the supreme enjoyer, if we hear his pastimes, then the tendency to envy Krishna will increase. If we only hear his pastimes without accepting him as the supreme enjoyer, then we ourselves will want to enjoy like that. So one should be guided very carefully. There's no exact formula, like 80% philosophy, 20% Leela, and then 80% philosophy, 50% Leela, 5% intimate Leela. Actually, intimate Leela is not meant for those, they should only be discussed when we're talking about the very intimate, conjugal, esoteric pastimes between Radha and Krishna. They should only be discussed among suitable persons, that means devotees who have actually developed their love for Krishna or free from the modes of material nature. There is no grounds to discuss these things among anyone who is materially affected. It is not approved by our acharyas to do so. So, exactly how much we should discuss Leela, there's no exact formula. But we can see that practically in all his lectures, letters, conversations, Srila Prabhupada was constantly speaking about philosophy, but sometimes tell some Leela, mostly briefly he would tell some story to bring out some philosophical point. Or in his books, his translations of Chaitanya Charitamrita and Nectar of Devotion, various intimate points may be there. So, as a general point, we could say that, well, this is discussion of Krishna katha, but it wasn't that Prabhupada gave us the standard for which to discuss Krishna katha. Bhagavad Gita, there's also Krishna katha. Now sometimes it's said, well, Prabhupada, he was speaking like that because that was the early days of ISKCON. And there were so many new people, so now we should discuss higher topics. But there are also so many new people now. And higher topics means that, yes, we should have become pure. If we're actually purified, then we discuss. But the tendency is to always think we're more advanced than we are. So these things, the point is they should be taken very cautiously. And the example of our previous Acharya, by previous Acharya I especially refer to Prabhupada, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, always tried to inculcate in us a philosophical understanding of the absolute truth, means Krishna, according to Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, we can discuss this more if you like, because it's there can be some questions afterwards. Now, one interesting point came up as I was discussing with some devotees this morning. The point came up that one devotee said that, well, talking about one devotee who is often speaking on leelas and intimate leelas, and even among very neophyte devotees. So one devotee in our discussion raised the point that, well, he's very sincerely doing so. He feels that this is what is required in ISKCON, and he's very sincerely doing so. So that's in modern society, if one feels sincerely about something, that's also considered to be in and of itself a justification. However, first we have to understand what is the meaning of sincerity. Sincerity should mean Guru Mokha Bhakta Vakya Chitete Kare Aika Ana Kare Maharashtra. That we are linked to the absolute truth through the bona fide Shastravid Acharya, and we make our heart one with his. We should act according to Guru Sadhu Shastra, according to Siddhanta. Now once Prabhupada was asked, what if an atheist is sincere? Now that may seem to be a very good question. One may be, I sincerely believe there is no God. And we find there's some in England there's some National Society of Atheists or something like that. I once asked someone to go to them to get some literature. You had to become a member of their society to even get their literature. So he's devotee, but he didn't have shikha for so long. He was doing business. So he went like that, and he told me the person was so happy when he came there. It was like they're making a new bhakta. But, oh, you want to be an atheist? Oh, how wonderful. So they got some of their literature. Just I wanted to see what are the arguments. I wasn't interested in becoming an atheist myself. So you could say they're sincere atheists, but Prabhupada pooh-poohed the question. He laughed. He said, how can you be a sincere atheist? It's like saying an honest thief. It's an oxymoron. It means a contradiction in terms. If one is sincere, then he has to accept that there is God. So he may say that, well, I really believe this. He may really believe it, but it's a sign of inherent crookedness. Because if one is actually satviyakti, actually a sincere person, then he must accept there is God, and at least come to the platform of Brahma Jignasa, inquiry into the absolute truth. The very endeavor to avoid God or to deny his existence, you may say, well, I'm sincerely doing that, but it cannot be accepted as genuine sincerity. It's interesting in this regard that everyone has some justification for what they're doing. Even the name of the Nazis under Hitler it's considered the worst, most inhuman thing that happened in recent history. But they also felt some justification. Hitler had a philosophy, and it's a plausible philosophy. I mean, on some level, that we are the Germans, and we are the best race in the world, and we we should dominate over the other neighboring races, and we require more land for our German nation, so we should just invade the neighboring countries and take it over. And the main problems of the German nation are the Jews, so, well, we'll deal with them. So they had a philosophy, wasn't it? It sounds like horrible philosophy, but actually it just, in various forms, that's what's going on in the world today. Might makes right. That's why I say that in one sense Hitler was better than Bush, senior or junior, because Hitler just said, "Hey, look, we're the Germans, we're strong, and we kick you in the face and kill you." But in the name of freedom, justice, humanity, democracy, and humanitarianism, Bush does the same thing. He invades a country and takes it over. So at least Hitler was saying it's for our national interest. At least he was honest about it. Whereas Bush, in the name of humanitarianism, actually it's in the name of Esso oil, and it's for the oil. Otherwise, there are so many things going on in Africa for so many years, they don't care. But their humanitarian values don't stretch to Africa. Only to Kuwait when they got invaded, and Iraq, and like this. So, they also had some philosophical or apparent philosophical justification. And after the Second World War, they had these trials of war criminals, and many Nazi leaders, they were convicted of organizing mass extermination of Jews and so on, and they were sentenced to death. But many of them went to their execution feeling that they had been wronged. I didn't do anything wrong. What did I do wrong? Many of them would say, well, I was just following orders. I was in a military government and I was following orders. And in Germany at that time, the whole thing, if you get an order, you follow it. That's all. That was the consciousness they were brought up in. So they couldn't understand what did I do wrong. I organized the execution of 200,000 Jewish citizens, but it wasn't my fault. I was just following orders, and they felt that was a completely moral justification. But now, according to the world international laws, even if you're following an order, you shouldn't do something which is what they consider morally wrong. Of course, you can kill millions of children in the womb as abortion, and millions of cows, but they consider that morally right. So they themselves don't know what they're talking about. But the point I'm making here is about sincerity, that everyone feels, I am sincere. What is the test? Someone may say, well, I'm sincerely spread. What ISKCON needs is Gopi Leela. We need more Gopi Leela. We need too much of this Bhagavad Gita. We need more Gopi Leela. So they may sincerely feel that. But what is the nature of sincerity? Sincerity means this. One should strictly follow what the Guru says. Not only what he says, but what is in his heart, one has to understand. That may also not be easy to understand. We'll find among the followers of Bhakti Saraswati Thakur, on various grounds, they thought he was deviating, not seeing that Prabhupada was fulfilling the heart's desire of his Guru. So, appeal that, well, I'm doing it sincerely, that in itself that should not stand among those who are Shastra-vid, because one has to see if one is acting according to Siddhanta, according to Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. This is the test. Otherwise, anyone may say, I'm sincere. They may feel, I'm doing what I'm doing it very sincerely. But one has to be properly guided and acting in a manner that is actually pleasing to one's guru. Otherwise, one's sincerity, what does that mean? Conviction of purpose, feeling that I'm doing the right thing. But simply feeling that I'm doing the right thing, just like an officer in the Hitler's army might feel I'm doing the right thing. But then he was judged to have not done the right thing and he himself was shot. So these atheist feels I'm doing the right thing. I'm sincere in my atheism. But that is not actual sincerity. So simply to consider oneself sincere, first one should see what is Siddhanta, what is the proper understanding, then proceed. Again we come to the point, it's not simply feelings, but that feelings has to be tempered by philosophy. Krishna consciousness is ultimately meant for rasa, for prema. But that, we'll have to see what is actual prema by understanding through Siddhanta. Otherwise, many people have very strong feelings. You'll see people dancing ecstatically in kirtan, but how much actually they're advanced in Krishna consciousness, we'll have to see maybe when the kirtan stops, that what are their material attachments. So many times I've seen in Bangladesh, people doing kirtan very ecstatically. As soon as the kirtan's finished, biri. So what is their actual advancement? Or I've seen people playing mridanga, jumping up and down, singing, dancing in full ecstasy, chanting some completely bogus mantra, glorifying some bogus so-called incarnation of God. So it looks like ecstasy, but the Siddhanta is completely wrong. So we have to understand through Shastra what is given to us, by Shastra, how it's understood by the Acharyas. And if we are actually sincere, then Krishna will reveal to us what is required. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam tadami buddhi yogam tam yena mamupi antita. If we are actually sincere, then Krishna will provide us with the intelligence to understand what is required to serve Krishna. Tadami buddhi yogam tam yena mamupi antita. By which they can go to me. No one can go to Krishna unless they're accepted by the servants of Krishna. And one can only be accepted by the servants of Krishna if one is actually sincere to serve Krishna. If one is thinking, now I'm going to go to Krishna to enjoy Krishna, if any such mood is there, one will not be alone. That's why there are many tests on the path of devotional service. Many tests to see, do we want to serve Krishna or do we want to enjoy Krishna? Alright, let's have some questions about this potentially controversial topic. It can be difficult to understand all the nuances of also.
You were explaining how we shouldn't try to enjoy Krishna consciousness.
Our basic attitude should be to be a surrendered servant, and from that attitude will come enjoyment. You want enjoyment? Yes, naturally we want enjoyment. That is the nature of the living being. But our endeavor should only be how to please Krishna. From that enjoyment will come. But even that enjoyment, we see the case of Daruka is given in the Nectar of Devotion, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, how he was fanning the Lord, but due to the ecstasy of fanning, of serving Krishna, he became stunned, and he cursed that becoming stunned. Now I can't fan Krishna. I can't serve Krishna properly. He didn't want the ecstasy. Let me serve. No need of ecstasy. That is ecstasy. Then.
According to our psychophysical conditioning that we have, there are certain services which we can do nicely, and there are certain services which tend to agitate our minds and which basically don't allow us to have full consciousness. So, this lecture about our services, is it against the principle of accepting Krishna as the enjoyer?
Acting according to our psychophysical nature in the service of Krishna, does it go against the principle of surrendering to Krishna as the supreme enjoyer? Well, maybe it's best we don't select our own service, but we may do so. If we say, well, I'm only going to do this service. See, I'm a brahmana, so I'm just going to sit and read. It's my service. Any demand means it's not service. But that may be worked out with our temple authorities or whatever. In the beginning, everyone should come and serve. Menial service. Clean the floor, clean the toilets, all these different things. So we can imbibe the mood of being a surrendered servant, ready to do whatever service is required. And then after some time, generally one gravitates towards, or one is placed in a service that may be more in sync with our psychophysical condition. Or it may be just like, for instance, if devotees are sent out to distribute Srila Prabhupada's books. Now that's a service which, well, in the Western countries, I don't know how many people have the psychophysical nature to constantly approach people day after day and try to sell them things that they don't want. Basically, no one's going out looking for Prabhupada's books. So that's more a matter of surrender. And similarly, if you have to go on a traveling bus party, whose psychophysical nature is it to want to bum up and down on the roads of Maharashtra in a bus, and then stand in the heat surrounded by flies and dust, and so that's an austerity taken in the service of the Lord. But like that, many services someone may be given service pujari, someone may be writing, someone may be doing secretarial work, someone may be cooking, and generally devotees tend to gravitate towards that which is in line with their psychophysical nature. Is this an infringement of the acceptance of Krishna as the supreme joy? I should do what I like. It could be, a lot depends on our attitude. In this regard, I would like to, the fan is also not good for me. So it's alright, a few flies. If that was the worst problem in life, then we wouldn't have any impetus to go back to Godhead. I'll relate one story from, one anecdote from long way back. One devotee, it's 1970s. Of course, it could be any time. One devotee is in England, he is very Brahminical by nature. So he's doing deity worship. He'd also do school programs, very, you could say, cultured English gentleman kind of nature. Really cultured because he wasn't eating meat or drinking. Devoted. So very sophisticated like this. Sophisticated, very Brahminical kind of nature. Always very clean and like this. Devotees appreciate it. One day the town president asked him that, you see there's so much garbage sitting out the back. Could you help bring that out? Now generally this kind of service would be given to the temple maintenance staff or new devotees who were going through that stage of just doing any service to see, do you actually want to serve Krishna? So this devotee was a little surprised because he wasn't usually asked to do such services. But he immediately agreed. Oh, okay. Alright. And he immediately got ready to do that service. Then Samrat says, no, actually you don't have to do it. I just wanted to see, are you a Brahmana or a Vaishnava? See? Are you attached to that Brahminical role, or are you a Vaishnava that you're prepared to do any service? So it makes sense to engage according to our psychophysical nature, but at the same time, we should be ready to perform any service that's required of us. You find even Arjuna, Krishna told that if you don't, you may try to avoid this fight, but anyway, by your very nature, you'll be compelled to engage in warfare. That's, you have such a strong nature like that. It's in the attitude. Am I doing this for my enjoyment or for Krishna's enjoyment? And of course it's not likely to be 100% either way, that we may be doing for our own enjoyment and for Krishna. Let me do this for Krishna's pleasure. But Maya always creeps in some form or other. In various gross and subtle ways. And of course, if there is some bona fide recitation of Krishna's pastimes, not that I'm not going to enjoy this. But how? We enjoy to hear how Krishna is the enjoyer. Yes, he is the enjoyer. But if someone comes with the idea that now I'm coming to give you something higher, which no one else is giving, and sometimes also it may be one sense of self-promotion too. I've got something better, I've got something higher. So we should be careful of that also. Is there any other question?
I want to ask, what is my opinion? What is your opinion about French books? There are some books which the materially interested people.
Which books, sorry?
Some sort of books which are they call French books. Between Krishna consciousness and the kind of subject matter that people are interested in. So, for example, maybe how by chanting Hare Krishna you can learn mind control, or stress management, or
we'll have to see by the result. A lot of times it may be that people remain on that side of the bridge. Or even worse, we ourselves, we cross over to the other side of the bridge. If we can successfully bring them over to the bridge, all well and good, but we ourselves have to understand what is our position, what we actually want to teach. Such books can be useful
in association with devotees who are fixed in understanding what it means to be Krishna conscious.
But basically they remain UFO conscious rather than Krishna conscious. Then they might say, well, they made some incremental step towards Krishna consciousness. But then why not give them the knowledge by which they can make the real step towards Krishna consciousness, which is in Bhagavad Gita, as it tells them that UFO maybe or may not be. What does it matter anyway? People in you're in Maya. The people in the UFOs, they're also in Maya. So what does it make that much difference anyway? Chant Hare Krishna, if there is any such thing as a UFO anyway. We become so much absorbed in this, and what often happens is, and what I've seen is that our devotees, by speaking a compromised kind of philosophy, they themselves start to believe it. Just like this Food for Life program that was started, then we advertise that we're helping the poor people by feeding them, and then we go to the public and say, give a donation for helping the poor, which is not our line. Our line is that everyone is suffering from lack of Krishna consciousness. And anyway, who are these poor people? I mean, in Pune, are there people starving to death? I doubt it very much. I know once in Baroda I went for we were trying to find some poor people to distribute prasadam to, in the name of poor feeding. So we went in the Chopapati and we found that there the young men have all got fancy hairstyles, and there's the beauty clinic and the video shop in those days. And, they have everyone has TV, VCR, everything. So where's the poverty? But then devotees, there's so much talking about we have to help the poor, the starving, the language of mundane people, because it elicits a response on the mundane platform. It's much easier to get people to donate for feeding them the mythical starving people than it is to give a donation to teach people how to get free from birth, death, old age, disease, and surrender to Krishna. It's easier to present untruth rather than truth, because people like untruth. They're addicted to that. But then what happens is devotees themselves start, we say it so many things and so many times and repeat it so many times, that we actually start to believe it ourselves, that we're actually helping the starving people, and the real object of this movement is to feed the starving, and we lose our focus. And then we get so much into, this UFOs and different energy fields, and we talk about all this kind of things, and where's Krishna? And not only that, this UFO and New Age, the very language they talk in is one of not of absolute conviction, that here is knowledge, Shastra. It's all on the my opinion, your opinion, this, that. So we get completely lost in New Age. Birth, death, New Age. One of those. So, and then we find out our devotees themselves, that they're not, instead of reading Prabhupada, then they don't get a taste for reading Prabhupada's books, because they're reading so many things. Jai Veda Maharaj, I think he resigned as editor of BTG. I don't know if it was coincidental, but shortly after some article was published about against having dogs as pets, and because it's dirty, and it increases our attachment to some mutt, which mutt in English slang means some dog, not mutt like ashtamat or something like that. So we become attached to some dog. Then after that article, there were so many letters of protest from devotees who were attached to their dogs. So this was quite a few years ago. So it seems that devotees, they're often they're keeping materialistic values. They're not accepting the values which are given in Shastra. So the dog is unclean. We don't keep dogs as in our house as pets and this and that. So we have to be very careful that if there's a bridge, make sure there's someone standing on this end who knows how to bring people over. Otherwise, the danger is that people will think that we be just like this. There's so many. Who's this? This art of living. His whole thing is mind control and how to fit into the modern materialistic society and be a success. Totally materialistic. Posing as a guru. He's got a good business going on. It's like 2,000 rupees to do his course, 6-day course. Is it? And then to go to his satsang, to have darshan of Guruji, you have to pay, 2,000 rupees, and more than a lakh of people come. It's a damn good business. He's got it down. But it's totally mundane. So people shouldn't confuse us with that. We ourselves shouldn't be confused. People often ask that How can I control my mind? I can't concentrate on my examinations. So we could answer in a way that would be beneficial for them to help pass their examinations, but then they'll again come back with and this and now how to improve my career, and which if one is a surrendered devotee, the Guru might, not necessarily, but might give some direction how you can live in this world and how you pursue your career in a Krishna conscious manner. But the role of sadhus is not as career advisors. It's not their prime duty. Prime duty is to teach people how to surrender to Krishna and go back to Godhead. So, bridge book. I thought you were first of all talking about like bridge meaning bridge, Vrindavan. He sometimes said Braj, sometimes said bridge. So, they may be there, but we have to keep our emphasis very clear. Once we stray from the path of speaking the undiluted truth, we have to be very careful. In one statement, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said that the aim of the preacher should be to speak the truth as directly and as unambiguously as possible. Any other question? Alright, you have many questions. No one else has any questions? Other topic also.
The NOD anecdote emotionally described that Jnana is not considered to be one of the elements of Bhakti because Jnana leads to hard-heartedness. And that prevents from the emotions of Bhakti from manifesting. So how is this compared to Jnana, the philosophy of Krishna consciousness?
That when we have to understand what this means. This means Jnane prayasamudapasya namante. This means that kind of Jnana in which one is simply trying to differentiate between spirit and matter with no touch of bhakti. But sambandha Jnana is absolutely required. When we say Jnana kama adhyanabritam, then that doesn't mean that there's no Jnana or karma in bhakti. If there's no Jnana and no karma, then what is bhakti? Bhakti is only Jnana and karma. That means knowing about Krishna and acting for Krishna. But those knowing about Krishna, that's directly included in bhakti. And acting for Krishna, that's directly included in bhakti. When we say karma and jnana, we generally refer to monistic jnana and karma, the karma kanda. But karma and jnana are also in Bhagavad Tattva Vijnana. Mat karma krin mat parama. So these are, we have to understand what the term means in context. Otherwise, where is the bhakti? If we don't know about Krishna, then where is the question of loving Krishna? Just like if we pull someone out of a crowd, we don't know who they are, we love them. How can you love? You have to know something about them. There has to be some basis for the love. There's also a reason why people without knowledge of God, they cannot actually love Him. Without, just like you'll find, there are some religious processes in which there's no real actual knowledge of God. So there's no real question of loving Him either. You have to know who He is, and we can love Him. He's naturally lovable. We have to know about it. So, hearing Bhagavad Gita should not make our heart hard. Rather, by hearing about Krishna, aham sarvasya prabhavo matah sarvam prabhavati iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samavita. Even though it may appear for some time to be very advanced, but they can't actually advance.